Hello, and welcome back to Learn It from a Layman. I am Carl Christensen. I'm back with Matt and Cameron. And Tim, I would like your vote, Cox.
I would too, and I'll
Oh.
pay you for it.
Well, that goes very well with today's topic then. Today we will be discussing the basics of American government today. And we will be giving the facts and background of the American government, not our particular flavor or ideas about American government. So once again, with the Learn It from a Layman, we try to keep it as factual as we can and still allow Tim on the podcast.
It's a delicate balance.
Before we get into the topic today, though, I did want to mention that we had one of our a super fan reach out, and we may have not addressed his question and request in a timely fashion. So I just wanted to let this fan know that we are grateful for your support, and this is so Ulysses Mendoza and his brother reached out. Well, he reached out and for his brother. So we're grateful you guys listen to the podcast. We have people all over the world listening, and we try to stay up on these things. But as laymen, sometimes we get a little behind.
But Ulysses, you will forever have the honor of being first.
That's right. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started here with the government podcast. So, the American government is, I guess, the first thing to address with American government is the type of government we have, and that's a republic, a democratic republic. So, Tim, tell us a little bit about what a democratic republic is.
Okay, so and you guys feel free to correct because I've totally not brushed up on this since my I think senior year. No, wait,
you
sorry,
are in your
scratch that.
senior years. So.
That's right. Actually, my freshman year of college, I remember. But anyways, okay, so you've got the idea is representation, government by representation. So the government is run by people elected by vote, and so you've got your three branches of the government, right? You've got the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. I suppose we'll get into that in a bit, but the idea being that decisions and policies and so forth are not formed by popular vote, but rather by representatives who are selected by the people who then make those decisions on behalf of their constituents, the people they represent. Is that what we're?
Yeah, that's a pretty good description of what a republic and a democratic republic is. Most republics are founded on a democratic principles. The idea that the people vote for other citizens, other members of the polis, the group of citizens there that will represent them in the government to make the laws and rules for the society. So a republic, we don't vote directly for the laws. We vote for the people that vote for the laws. Now, as I think Tim and I did, I don't know, it's been more than a year ago now, Tim, we did a podcast about economic systems and how very often they end up to be a bit hybrid. Nothing is pure as far as what particular economic system different governments or different countries adopt. That's probably pretty true about different government styles as well, because if you live in the United States, you know that sometimes you do vote directly for laws, at least at the state level, things that are on referendums or various ways you can actually vote directly for a law versus voting for a person. But that's not, by and large, how it's done. The vast majority of American government is done via the representatives that are elected to then go and fulfill that function of, that they were elected for. So let's talk a little bit about the various functions that they are elected for. And so to do that, we need to discuss the difference between a state government and a federal government. Matt, do you want to regale us with the difference?
The state government would be the government of the state that you are in the United States, your state being a state. The federal government would be the government of all the United States, the government of the U.S. as a nation, rather than as an individual state.
Yes, quite. So,
federated from federated. There
exactly.
We go.
Exactly.
And I think now might be a good time to note that our current form of government did not originate in 1776 or even after the Revolutionary War. The first national government was a confederation, right?
Under the Articles of Confederation.
Yeah,
right.
Yes.
And it ended up being a much weaker federal government, kind of a toothless. The power really lay in these states. And after about 10 years, give or take, they figured out this isn't working, and so they, the founding fathers held a constitutional convention, convened it, and organized a more powerful federal government.
A more perfect union, if you will.
Indeed.
Is that a unique phrase you've just come up with?
Yes.
You learned it here on Learn It From a Layman.
That's right. Copyright.
1787, I believe, is when.
Is that what it was?
Constitution. Yeah, I believe. I could be totally wrong, but I feel that is.
We should maybe look that up. Anyway. But
we'll get right on that. Okay, so thank you. Yes, so any discussion of American government will get us back to the roots of the government, and that was the post-Revolutionary War, where the colonies became their own nation, and then tried to figure out what that meant and how to govern themselves, and took pieces from various governments of the past and ideas from various philosophers to put together a particular government that they thought would be both enduring and represent the people well. It was, as we know, imperfect, and we've been working on it's changed since then. How about that? So the federal government is Matt said, the government that is in charge of the whole country. So we have a lot of listeners outside the United States, I would imagine, and though I have not listened to a lot of news outside the United States, the vast majority of news about the United States is about the federal government. You probably don't hear
thereof.
Right. Yeah. As opposed to hearing how, the governor of Arizona or the legislative body in Arizona reacted to a particular topic or law. So the federal government is the one that gets most of the press. The elections, the federal elections, are the ones that get the majority of the money and interest in them. So, but the federal government has particular constitutional authority, and the state governments have particular authorities, and those hopefully work together. Sometimes they push and pull against each other, and that's been the case since the beginning of this country. Back what Tim was talking about, if you've seen the Hamilton production, that even the beginning of the United States, there were founding fathers that were for very state-centered rights or state-centered powers of government versus federal government, where they didn't really trust the federal government. And so over the years, that has been a constant tug of war. But that is the difference between a federal and a state government. Now, let's move on. So Tim already mentioned the various branches of government. So you have the judicial, the legislative, and the executive. Cameron, do you want to tell us what the judicial branch is?
I just want to clarify. I did. The current Constitution was written in 1787 and ratified in 1788. So
good job. So you're right on there. Pretty accurate. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's way better than most of our off-the-cuff guesses.
That's right.
So the judicial branch basically makes laws. That's what they do. They
Well,
enact.
that's the executive branch. Oh, sorry, the legislative
Right.
branch is the one that makes the laws.
Fine. They enforce laws.
That's the executive branch. We're getting there, though.
What do you mean?
The judicial branch is supposed to be the one that decides whether or not particular questions about the law, they essentially
They judge
they
the
judge
law.
They judge the law. Exactly.
Interpret, right?
Yeah. And so there is
Supreme Court and
right.
other courts.
Exactly. Yep.
And I think we can add to that in the system of checks and balances, the judicial branch also serves as an external, I don't know if mediator is the right word, but sometimes as a check on the other branches, where and some listeners may recall the 2000 election, where it came down to it was a very close margin in Florida, which would decide the outcome of the election. And I believe that in the end, the Supreme Court ended up, calling or deciding how it was going to play out. I don't recall the details, but those kinds of things. This idea that one branch of the government balances power against the other. So the president gets to the executive branch gets to choose the judges of the judicial branch, but they have to be ratified by members of the legislature. But then members of the judiciary can strike down laws passed by the legislature or actions by the executive and so forth.
And if this sounds confusing to the rest of you, it's confusing to most of the citizens of the United States.
Sorry, I'm probably not, and I'm probably doing this all out of order. So, Carl,
no, that's good. And Cameron's right. I think for most laymen, like, you're familiar with the president. You know that there's a person, that there's a senator, that there's you probably know that the House of the Representatives is a thing, but how they all interact is sometimes fodder for high school class, and then you kind of forget about it. But it's important to remember what their different roles are. And
here's a much better answer of what the judicial branch does.
Okay,
it interprets state laws, it settles legal disputes, it punishes violators of the law, it hears civil cases, protects individual rights granted by the state constitution, and determines the guilt or innocence of the accused of violating crimes of the laws of the state.
Wikipedia for the win.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure Cameron just wrote that right now. Okay. Yes. So judicial.
Much better answer than what I said.
They're the judges, and so they fill all of those things that Cameron just said, and the ones that we're the most familiar with, and once again get the most press because they apply to all of us, are the Supreme Court, which is the last stop in the chain of judges. So if you have a problem with a law that is enacted by Congress, and Congress is the legislative branch, then you take it to a court and the judges there decide, right? And then if you don't like their decision, or if you feel like you have grounds that they made the wrong decision, you can continue appealing. Appealing is moving that that decision that they made to a different and higher court that has more authority. And the buck stops with the Supreme Court. That's the highest court of the land. And when they make a particular ruling, that is as far as that can go. And the judicial branch. So the judicial branch is the only branch where you have, by and large, unelected officials. I think you do sometimes vote for judges on the ballot. If you fill out a local ballot, you'll see some of your judges. But by and large, like Tim said, they're appointed by the executive branch. Executive branch is the one, once again, I think outside of the country and even inside the country, we generally associate with the government, and that's your president or governor. So the president is of the federal government, the governor is of your state government, and they are the ones that execute. Thus, executive comes from execute. That means they enforce the law. They bring it into action. So once the legislative branch writes a law, a bill, before it becomes law, and votes for it, and then it passes on to the either governor or president to become a law, at which point that elected official can decide whether or not they want to sign that. If they do not sign it, or they can do what's called veto it. They veto means we're not doing my branch is saying no, I'm not doing this. My branch of government, that is. And so that will then go back down to the legislative branch, or back over, I guess, to the legislative branch. And the legislative branch, if they can get enough votes for it, can override a veto. That means that if the legislative group, a body of elected representatives, feels strongly enough about a particular issue, up to the point of, it's usually 3/4, I believe, you can override a veto, an executive veto. So if the president says no, the legislative branch can still say, actually, yes, we are having this law.
2/3.
2/3?
I thought so.
Close.
I could be wrong.
Yeah,
the veto rests only with the legislative. I'm sorry, I'm getting confused. The veto is a power that's given to the executive branch. That's different from the authority that the legislative branch has to rule a law as unconstitutional or invalid.
Right. Well, that's the judicial branch that has that power, right?
Yeah. Did I get that wrong again?
I don't know. Who knows? The judicial branch can look at a law that the legislative branch came up with and was signed into law by the executive branch and say, actually, guys, according to the Constitution of the United States or the Constitution of the state of Utah or Arizona, what you made a law is illegal. You can't. That we don't have the right to do that, or that's violating people's rights, or whatever that is. And so the judicial can then say, nope, that's not a law anymore. And so this is, like Tim was saying, the checks and balances of the executive branch pushing back against the legislative branch pushing back against the executive branch, the judicial branch pushing back against both branches. So there are various reasons that you want this, and to some degree you want these branches to have this tug of war, because if everyone agrees, you can get an issue where certain rights of individuals can be trampled. And so you want, to some degree, these checks and balances to hold in check the unlimited power of government. So that's kind of the philosophy behind the reason that we have these various branches of government. Now let's go a little bit deeper on the legislative branch. So we talked about the Senate and the House of Representatives. Tim, can you tell us a little bit about a Senate versus a House of Representatives?
Yeah. So the House of Representatives is probably more intuitive how it works. It's based on population. You have each state, based on its population, is allotted so many seats to send representatives in the House of Representatives. So the more it's just representation of the population. So everyone living in the United States has someone representing them in the House of Representatives, I guess with the exception of Washington, D.C., which is interesting, but we're going to talk about that later. And so but the Senate is different. The Senate is not a population-based body. It's based on the states. So each state, large or small, has 2 senators. So there are 100 senators in the Senate, and there's hundreds of representatives in the House of Representatives. Anyways, I suppose that's good enough for a start. Is that?
Yeah, exactly.
And then legislation coming out of Congress needs to pass both houses, both chambers.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and so a couple, I guess, more side notes than actual additions to what you're saying, Tim. But I think once upon a time, early on in the history of the United States, the federal Senate, the Senate that most of us talk about when we talk about the Senate, was not democratically elected. Am I getting? Is anyone
correct?
confirm? Right.
Yeah, senators would originally were elected by. I'm not sure if it's the same electors who elect the president, but yeah, they were not directly elected by the people. It would have been it would have been more a state affair. So the electors elected by the people of the state would then elect the senators, and if I'm not mistaken, it's the same electors who elect the president and still do. And then at some point, I can't remember the date when they changed that to make senators a populace-based representatives, where the popular vote outright determines the state senators.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and so that what Tim referenced there also. So that used to be the case with senators, that they weren't elected directly democratically, and now they are. That's all. It's always been the case that the House of Representatives has been elected democratically, meaning everyone votes, and whoever gets the most votes wins that seat in the House of Representatives for that district. The president of the United States is still not directly voted for, and that makes a lot of people very angry. And I'm not here to give any opinion on whether or not the Electoral College is anything. I'm not here to give that opinion. What I am here is to explain what the Electoral College, the reason behind it originally, is that, once again, this tug of war between the federal and state governments, the idea that and this idea that we want a republic. We want to vote for people that will vote for laws. And so in this case, it was, let's vote for people that will vote for the president. And so it's this idea of giving more power to the states versus the federal government, and more power to these elected electors that will go to the Electoral College and then decide on who should be the president, based generally on the will of the people. But electors were not always required to vote for who their state voted for. I think most states now have written into their law that their electors do have to do that, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, it is a bit of a tangled mess, at least in my mind.
And I think it's worth noting that there are two reasons that people, or I suppose there's more than that, but I think there's two major ones that I'm aware of why people take issue with the Electoral College. The one, I think, is more a philosophical thing, where people take umbrage with the fact that their vote doesn't officially count for voting for the president, that it's an elector who's voting it, and people don't like that. There's also this is, I think, relatively recent, but there's been lots of debate, because recently, historically, it's been kind of a non-factor. The popular vote and the Electoral College vote have always gone the same way. But recently, in recent elections, there's been, I guess, a few where the popular vote has gone one way, but the electoral vote has gone another way. And I think we need to keep in mind that's not because the electoral vote wasn't representing the people who elected them in each state. So it wasn't like some failing in the Electoral College system, but it's the fact that because the Electoral College system results in the awarding of votes based on states, you can have some states where one candidate is overwhelmingly supported, and that candidate gets those votes. But if the other candidate gets a whole bunch of closely contested states, then you can have a situation where the first candidate had a whole lot more votes, but because the other candidate got a lot of closely contested states, they have fewer votes, but ended up with more electoral college votes and with the presidency.
Right. Yeah. And so the electoral college, like we could talk about it for quite a while, I think. Generally, the number of electors that you have from your state is the number of senators plus the number of House seats. And those are generally the votes of those electors are generally awarded on a winner take all, like Tim was just talking about, meaning whoever wins the majority of the vote for president in your state wins all of the votes for the electors, and they aren't generally divvied out proportionally to the number of the percentage of votes that a particular candidate got. It's just whoever got the most gets all the electoral. So in my state, in California, we have a very large number of House of Representative seats because there turns out a lot of people in California. And so when California votes for president, whoever gets the most votes in the state of California gets all of the electoral votes. So that can, like Tim said, make you feel like, okay, well, that's one scenario where you can say, okay, well, my vote doesn't count. But the other flip side of that is, well, if we voted directly democratically, then the people that live in smaller states or rural areas will feel like, okay, well, whatever Los Angeles votes for is going to be the president. So anyway, it's there's a lot going on in the electoral system. And like I said, I'm not telling you how to feel about it, just what it does and that it's still a thing. All right. So as far as the Senate, we said that's the Senate and the House of Representatives have a role in the legislative branch and in the process. And the Senate and the House both have to pass these bills to make them become law, at which point it goes on the executive branch of the president or the governor. So each state has their own Senate and House of Representatives, and then obviously at the federal level we have a Senate and a House of Representatives. Now, this is when we get so at the federal level, the Senate is just 2 seats per state. That's something you learn in high school. All of those things, it's very simple to understand. And the House of Representatives is the trickier thing as far as, well, how many representatives do I get in the state of California versus how many in the state of Arizona or Utah or whatever, Illinois? How do we determine how many seats I get from my state in the federal government? And that's determined by the census. And so that's when the United States government goes out and does a census. It tries to count the number of people in each state.
The census is the biggest thing in counting since kindergarten.
Thank you, Tim.
You're welcome.
Right. So it is important, and then this census happens every 4 to 6 years or something like that. I don't remember
years.
Actually. 10. I was close. Every 10 years. So that's when new seats can be awarded to a state, or if you've lost population, you lose House of Representative seats. And so the census is a big deal as far as awarding those seats in the government. The other tricky thing, though, is then once a certain number of seats are awarded to a state, you have to then figure out which representatives represent which areas.
Oh, gerrymandering.
Yes, exactly. And that's when you get to this idea of creating districts inside a particular area, right? Inside states in this case. So inside the state, I need to create a particular district. Well, how am I going to create that district? And who's going to create that district? And then very quickly that becomes this political question of, well, can I create a district that will be advantageous to a particular political party? And that
that is the suspicion. That is not how.
Well, right. Initially, I don't think that was the idea, but that is what it's become.
Right. Well, even then, I mean, that is, when that happens, and that is called gerrymandering, that's a bad thing.
Right.
That's
generally,
not necessarily the norm. Many places employ a bipartisan commission to try to prevent that, where multiple parties agree on the districts in order to prevent either that occurring or to prevent the perception of that occurring.
Right, and there is a simple way to kind of determine whether gerrymandering has happened. What you do is you look at it, and if the results favor your party, then it wasn't gerrymandering, and if they don't, then it clearly was.
So, that is sarcasm, but unfortunately we have to say that because it would be nice if more people didn't believe that, but whatever.
Yes.
Thanks for making it clear, Matt. I suppose it's best. Yep,
So,
it's true.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So, yes, it's districting and redistricting. Like Matt said, if it's done in a bipartisan fashion, and bipartisan, the word bipartisan means that both
multiple
parties,
parties,
right?
Because
Right.
bi means two, and there's not necessarily just two parties.
That's true. You could, I don't know, the other term that would be applicable, I guess, would be unanimous, or just not political. A political decision, though, is going to, by nature, bear some taints of some hue of politics, and so it's.
I mean, that's why we appoint people to be in government, is to make decisions. Every decision made is going to be a reflection of the judgment of the values of those people. That's why when you're voting for a representative, or you're voting for a judge or an executive, understand that they're going to make their decisions, and you select your voter or the candidate for whom you vote based on whether or not their values generally align with yours. Right. And, by and large, that's what happens. Or at least, anyway, that's the theory.
Right. Yeah, that's the idea behind a republic in general, right? Is that you'll have a certain amount of time to gather information about a candidate, right? That's the time where they're running for office, and where you'll be able to gather what they think of a particular political issue. However, once you elect them, things will come up that they did not campaign on, that they didn't run on, and that's why you need to know the political, the values of the person that you're voting for matter in a republic, as well as the particular political questions of the day. It's a multifaceted thing. So, okay. One other thing I wanted to talk. So we talked about districting and then the issue that becomes gerrymandering, which is trying to create districts to the advantage of your political party, the political party that's in power, that has the responsibility to do the districting, the creating these House representative districts. If they then say, okay, well, I want this area for my district because it votes this way more often, that's gerrymandering, right? So so now you know what that term is. But let's go back to the Senate and the House, and the idea that at this point, I guess for all elected officials, any elected official can and is still a part of a public office, and so as such it has to answer to the people, and there are various mechanisms that are in place in the American government in order to hold them responsible for particular either crimes or whatever else, and that's impeachment, right? Impeachment or recall. California is famous for recalling. We've done it a few times. Recalling our governor, and so a recall is generally it's a grassroots effort to say that this person is doing such a bad job in the government that we want to pull them out of office. So in the United States, you have a particular term that you're elected for, right? Governors are elected for 4 years. Senators are elected for, at least federal senators are elected for 6 years, and House of Representatives is elected for 2 years. And if, however, during this term of service, they're doing not only a bad job, but a job that you think warrants them to be taken from office, you can recall them. At least in some states, that mechanism exists where you can take them down. And that's they have to sign a petition in the state of California that a certain percentage or a certain number of people have to sign a petition, at which point it goes to a recall election. And you can, if they are then recalled by the majority of the people that vote, they will be pulled out of office, and a new leader, a new person will be put in that position to take the remainder of that term of service. So that is a recall. Like I said, I think that depends on the different states that have different laws for how to recall someone and all those questions. But that's one mode of holding a elected official responsible and accountable for the decisions while in office. And the other is more of another function of government, which is a type of impeachment, which we've seen recently also. What was that, Tim?
No, that impeachment is the trial to see if about removing them. So impeachment isn't the removal itself. So right. An official can be impeached, but then not removed from office.
Correct.
Or impeached and removed from office, depending on the result of the impeachment.
Yes, exactly. So it is just a formal process of holding an elected official accountable. And they said that removal from office is also something that lies. In this case, we're discussing what happened in the year a few years ago. When did this happen? 2020, with the President Trump and the impeachment proceedings.
Time? Yeah, there were two.
Okay, right.
So there was the one in 2020 and the one in 2018 or 19?
I don't remember either. And so then the Senate votes for impeachment, and the House votes for impeachment, and so each body of the legislative branch can decide whether or not to impeach, and then whether or not to remove.
I was going to say, interesting enough, the state that I live in does not allow recalls.
Does it not? Okay. I was going to say, I'm actually sure that all states do. So you're saying Utah does not then, Cameron?
It does not. That's what Google is telling me.
Interesting.
We do not allow recalls here.
Okay. And I know that in, like I said, other countries, like I don't know enough about the system of governments in other countries to really speak in an educated fashion, but I know there's like snap elections in some European countries that can just be called to deal with a particular party or person in power that can then vote them out. And it's not necessarily the whole term of, it's whenever this snap election process, this process is triggered, and that's when they vote. But like I said, I can't tell intelligently about what that process looks like or how those elections get triggered. So.
I'll just comment a little bit on that. I happened to be in England when in the snap election that when Theresa May was elected or prime minister, and it was so in this case it was a vote of confidence. That election, the prime minister, I forget his name, Tony or something.
Tony Blair.
Tony Blair. Maybe was that the one before Theresa May?
Well, I'm not sure.
Whatever. In any case, he had pledged to. Brits, you'll have to give you can comment on the real story, but something about it was about Brexit, and Tony Blair had basically said, "Hey, if the people will vote for it, then I will basically stand at. We'll have I'll go a snap election for my replacement." And it was kind of a gamble, and he lost. And so they ended up doing a new election. He kind of lost the confidence of Parliament or however it works. So they had a new election, and the prime minister is not, easily confused with a president for Americans because it's the highest political office in the country. But the prime minister is not as I understand it, is not, elected by the people, but is rather chosen by the party, the ruling party, the party that is in control of the parliament. It's the leader of that party who is the prime minister. Can anyone verify, make sure I'm not totally ruining parliamentary government function?
Yeah, I don't know, but I did want to make a quick aside. Tony Blair was prime minister quite a while ago. So if we're talking about Brexit, you're thinking of Boris Johnson.
No. It was before. So Johnson replaced Theresa May. It was before
Correct.
Theresa May.
Cameron.
Boris Johnson also lost confidence after a scandal, and so they had a new snap election for our the new prime minister. So I guess
This is a fascinating look at American government here.
As we unintelligently discuss British politics, let's quickly also discuss the pound.
I think the Brits would be quick to note that most of American government is based on British, tradition, British common law, and
there's a fair amount of British influence in the American government, obviously. Okay, so back to American government. Okay, so let's hit one or two more things here. The executive branch, the president, also has the responsibility to be the commander-in-chief. So they are in charge of the United States military, and they are the commander, obviously. So that's a role of a very obviously important role of the executive branch. Now, as far as voting is concerned, and this is once again been all over the news in the last couple of years in the United States, the states set the requirements to vote, and so different states have different requirements as far as what you need in order to register to vote and how the process to vote. And so that is important as a citizen of the United States or someone that lives in the United States to go through the process of figuring out, well, how do I vote? Because while it is true that in this country of over 330 million people, there's a lot of votes out there. So your individual vote is just one of 330 million. You being an educated member of the country is a reflection of the country. And so if we can all educate ourselves on what's going to be best for our political system, for our government, then I believe that the way that we vote will be more representative of the things that we want to accomplish as a country. So voter registration is very important. So take the time. In most states, it's quite easy. There are nonprofit organizations out there that help you get registered to vote. And so if you haven't done that, go ahead and spend probably 10 minutes doing it. And if there are voter laws that you don't agree with on the books in your state, one way or the other, make that a priority, because it's important that, like I said, we take responsibility for the government, and voting is where it comes down to at the individual level of making sure that we both try to identify the system that we want to run in our country, and also the individuals that we want to run that system. And so voting is generally every 2 years in the United States. You'll have a federal or a state election every 2 years, and sometimes more than that. And on those ballots, there'll be the federal level, there'll be the state level, and there'll be community level, or county or city, wherever you live. There, all of those different levels of government will be represented, and it's really easy to Google your federal level candidates and find out information about your candidates for president, obviously, or Senate, even House of Representatives at the federal level. It becomes more complicated as you move down the chain because, like I said, most of the press goes to those higher federal levels because they affect all Americans. As you move down to your state and then to your county or city, the amount of information on the internet or readily available is significantly less. And so then it becomes a question of how much, how do I find out that information? Where can I go to get reliable information about the local candidates? Because it turns out, while the federal officials do matter, and your elected, senator or House representative is an important thing to consider, your city makes a big difference. So who you vote for mayor or city council or auditor, all those different things, that matters as well. So take the time to try to identify the material that's out there and find who's going to represent your values at your city level.
And you can turn to reliable mailers and political signs and billboards to get good information on the facts.
Best way to vote is count the number of signs.
No, it's really my wife hates election season because of the proliferation of wacky signs and stuff that comes in the mail, spam texting, whatever. But I find in Arizona, at least, the state government, the Secretary of State, actually compiles a booklet and sends it out. And it gives candidates a chance to speak for themselves. It gives a rundown of items on the ballot and what's going on, and so it's not too hard to get at least a basic feel for, as long as you're willing to read a bit. In other states and other areas, you might have to try looking things up, but generally, if you go to your state government website, you can find something on the elections and inform yourself.
Right.
See,
Cameron, you had something to say?
You guys are saying these words like study, read. That's some scary stuff for a lot of people out there.
Another trick is to just find a reliable source, like learn it from a layman, and just do what they tell you.
Generally, you want to watch out for allowing social media and or podcasts to tell you who to vote for. However, in this case, no.
Since we just said that, you can trust us.
That's right.
You can trust us that we will agree with whatever you choose to agree with.
That's right.
I do. This anecdote, though, when I was an 18-year-old, we had the first election, right? The first election I was old enough to vote vote at the age of being able to vote in the United States is 18. So I was turned 18. It was time to vote, and I'm an 18-year-old college student, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't have enough time to do my homework, much less figure out who to vote for. And so what I did, and what I say, you turn to the most reliable person that you know well. So that you have access to that lives in your area, right? So what I did is I went to my grandpa, and I said, "What was that, Cameron?"
Is it so you turned to Tim and asked him?
That's right.
Yes, and then I just vote for the exact opposite of what Tim says.
You've revealed the secret.
No, I went to my grandpa and I said, "Grandpa, I'm going to go vote. Tell me who you voted for." And he went, as he was a very wise man, he not only told me who he voted for, but why he voted for them. He's a very thoughtful man. And so I felt very good just doubling up his vote. And so that's what I did. And so if you are a college student out there overwhelmed by the amount of things you have to do in your life, or maybe not even just a college student, whatever the scenario you are in your life, and you say, find someone that you trust a lot and say, okay, what do you think about this? And that is at least something. That's at least an intelligent way to try to approach it. I do think ideally, you have some time and spend a couple hours digging in to at least some of this. But if you can do nothing else, find someone that you really admire and go look to what they're doing. So
that does seem smart.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure there are many parts of American government that we have not even talked about. However,
sorry to all the civics teachers listening and saying, "What?"
I think we're going to wrap it up here. Tim, any final words?
I just want to say two things of a philosophical nature. One, there's certainly a lot of polarized rhetoric and anger that is floating around in American political discourse recently, especially in the last 10 to 20 years. And I just want to encourage people listening to don't give in to cynicism and never check out of the system. I think one of the things that makes the American experiment in government great is its resilience. We're the oldest constitutional representative government in the world. And I think a big reason for that is because we believe in what we're doing. And in spite of deep differences across the political spectrum and different parties, I feel like the large majority of Americans still believe deeply that the way we run our country is a gift and an opportunity, and so don't give in to those cynical demons that and sometimes it's hard not to do that. I think 2 years ago when I saw the footage of the storming of the U.S. Capitol, and it was just mind-boggling and terrible, and it's apocalyptic in appearance, and you start to think, is this the end, or is this the beginning of the end? And I'm convinced that is certainly not the case. If you study American history, you'll see that at many stages in our history, there were there was uproar, there was terrible divides, nasty rhetoric, including stuff that is just as bad or worse than the things we see today. And but we continue to have faith in our system, to have faith in our, if not in our government in the sense of the people we've elected to run it, or I might say the people that all those dweebs elected to run it, because I didn't vote for that person. But we still have faith in the government, the institution that has been established and has functioned as a caretaker of our civic community for more than 200 years now. And so anyways, keep participating and keep your chin up, and don't believe for a second that this can't work. We can continue to make our community and our society work for the general good. And one last thing I'll say: learn to love the people you disagree with on both sides of the aisle, because it is possible, and indeed it's impossible, not to have good people who see the same issue very differently. And so never give in to those voices who say that the people who disagree with you have to be bad. That is a rhetorical parlor trick designed to stir up your anger and make you do things that, or say things that don't need to be done or said. Anyway, sorry, blah blah blah. I'm done.
Roll the patriotic music.
Yes, that's right. Can we get some footage of a flag waving in the breeze?
That's right. Tim, for something.
Yes, you can vote for me at the next election.
Okay, Matt, any words of wisdom?
I think we've had about all the wisdom that we can stand here.
That was gently put, and very true, very true.
Okay, right. And Cameron?
Be nice to people. It goes a long ways.
Good.
Here.
Yes. And as the great renowned philosopher Uncle Ben said, with great power comes great responsibility.
There you go.
If that wasn't somebody else first. But he certainly said it, so I'm going to give it to, Spider-Man's
Uncle Ben.
I'd vote for Uncle Ben.
Okay, well, hopefully this has been at least a bit educational. Hopefully, if you didn't know these things, you're a little more familiar with them, and maybe get a little refresher course. Like I said, share this podcast with friends. Let us know what you think, and if there are particular subjects in any field, because obviously we can handle any of them, that you'd like us to cover, and or ones
Also
that we've
share
gotten
this
wrong.
podcast with your enemies and see how that happens too. You know,
That's
Maybe
right.
especially with your enemies.
never know.
Great. All right. Well, thank you. We'll be back in next podcast. Until then, see ya.